Okay, I think our PowerPoint is good to go. I think we're good. I think we can start.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Robert Craig. I'm Executive Director of Citizen Action of Wisconsin. We're going to be digging in like you have not heard before about the Inflation Reduction Act. That is the part of President Biden's bold agenda that could get 50 votes in the U.S. Senate and could pass the Senate parliamentarian and therefore become law without a single Republican vote. So it's both what can get 50 votes without passed without a Republican. It's also what Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, the two most conservative Democrats, will sign off on. But even having said that, there are major advances in this, and it is building blocks for our movement to go further. So the advances are significant in of themselves, but they do not need to be the first step if we build the power step by step to move forward and move further. And just a little word on what we're going to do here and what I'm going to say quickly before I hand it over to Karen. We'll review in sequence the healthcare provisions, which Karen will lead on, our campaigns director, Karen Kirsch, who I think most of you know. I will talk to us about the climate provisions, which are the most complicated and involved, and then the least complicated involved, which is the tax fairness advances. But before handing it to Karen, I want to briefly talk about how Citizen Action sees change. And we see ourselves as radical pragmatists. And what I mean by that is we do want to get to system reform, to transformation. But we also realize we don't have the power to win that right now. We don't have the legislative support. We don't have the mass movement to achieve that. And we think that in most of American history, it has occurred in big stepping stones, and that there is stepping stones, that is compromises that move us forward and give us new opportunities, and also help people in the near term and also create more equity. And they're actually damaging compromises. And what we're going to tell you is that this is a good compromise, that it does push the far end of the possible. And what that means is this is the most radical thing we can do, with Joe Manchin being the 50th vote and Kyrsten Sinema, the senator from Arizona, being the 50th vote. And it took a lot. It was a surprise anything this bold occurred. We could not have gotten more. Perhaps if we had an even stronger outside push, particularly in the states of Arizona and West Virginia, we could have got over the top, but I think even that's doubtful, particularly given that West Virginia is so deeply a Trump state. And so we look at, as I said, does it actually help a lot of people on significant things we're working on? In this case, climate and healthcare and tax fairness and taxing the ultra rich and the largest corporations. Does it advance equity? We have had good reforms in the past that help people, like the GI Bill, for example, but actually made racial equity worse. So we don't want to do that anymore either, given how bad economic inequality is generally and how much even worse than that racial inequality is and remains in this country. And so this, we believe, also advances for a number of reasons we'll get into, greater equity as well. And I want to kind of end on this. We have other criteria, but these are the main ones I'm giving you. We want to shift power from big dominant economic actors, the ultra rich and the biggest corporations, and towards the people, towards democracy. And if you think about what the right-wing conspiracy is, Nancy McLean's book, Democracy in Chains, the title gets it perfectly right. They want to chain democracy and limit its power so that they can control most of the country and most of the wealth and take most of the economic gains for themselves. And you look at the healthcare system, it is dominated by the interests of for-profit actors or actors that act like for-profits, the big hospital conglomerates. And it is all about getting as much profit as possible, as much return, and not about the fundamental human right to health care. They don't care about that. The only people who care about that is we, the people, and the only way to guarantee it is for us to shift power from the drug companies, from the health insurance industry, from the big hospital conglomerates to the people. And what the provisions Karen's going to talk about, they are steps in that direction, steps we can build on from a policy standpoint, but also from a movement standpoint, but only if we then organize, build a bigger base of people. We have more organized people to continue to back down organized money. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen for the healthcare provisions.
Yes, hi everyone. I feel privileged to talk to you tonight about this issue. I am Karen Kirsch. I am the campaigns director at Citizen Action. Previously, many of you know me as the healthcare organizer. So this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. And I feel privileged because this has long been Citizen Action's issue. No pressure or anything. Robert is always been the premier person in Wisconsin to talk about healthcare. So he has handed the torch to me. So I feel very honored to be here and to talk to you about this tonight. So we wanted to really make sure that instead of giving you like all of the facts, I know everyone loves facts. I love facts too. People on the left love facts. We love science. We wanted to bring it up a little bit and give you the higher viewpoint and how to think about this, as Robert had alluded to before me. So healthcare, how to think and how to talk about it. Okay, so I know that many of you have heard some of the specific stories about how people are being harmed by our healthcare system. If you've ever attended one of our events, if you've ever talked to me, you've heard people talk about how they have been harmed. Okay, our system has disabled people. It has maimed people. It has made people live in pain. It has killed people. It has killed children. It has killed adults. It has left children orphaned, okay? And let's end with, it has disproportionately hurt people of color as well. Okay, sometimes when we talk about our system, we clean it up a little bit too much. We're being a little too sterile. Let's talk about the reality that we know is happening in our communities, happening to our families, and happening to our loved ones. This is not merely people are being denied care, okay? People are being killed and people are being hurt. So I just wanted to name that. I wanted us to all learn how to sharpen our language when we talk about what is happening to us. And I know that I have many people that are listening tonight that have had many of these things happen to you. And I'm very sorry that that's happened to you. So I just wanted to go to this little slide for you. And this is exactly what Robert just talked about before me, okay? This is the mechanism that is doing it to us, right? This is the mechanism that is killing people and harming people. It is the for-profit actors, the conglomerates in the hospital system, the drug companies, the big insurance companies. Let's name who is doing this to us and who is hurting us. This is our problem. All right, and I'm also running the AV, so bear with me here. So as Robert said, the goal is to shift the power away from them to us. This is essentially what a single payer system is the power to set the price. The people have the power, okay? So we're shifting the power to us, and it's going to take some time. Let's be realistic. This is 20% of our economy. To shift 20% of our economy is a large endeavor. So let's accept that this is going to take some time, okay? And the Inflation Reduction Act is a step towards this goal. And that's why I gave you a nice picture of steps. That's why we showed you the picture of the stepping stones. We need to step our way there. And we made progress. This is very exciting for us. All right, so this is what a lot of you have been waiting for. So this is probably the most popular provision in the Inflation Reduction Act. It's prescription drugs, because prescription drug prices have been causing people to suffer for quite a long time. So I'll go through some of the specific provisions for you. I'll give you some of the specific facts. I know a lot of you want to know some of this, and I understand because there's some self-interest there. I too can be attracted to my own self-interest. When I heard about the student loan forgiveness, I have a daughter, sophomore year in college. I started looking into my own self-interest for her, so I understand this. So I'm going to give you some specific facts, but I wouldn't recommend when you're talking to people, when you're talking to your neighbors, when you're talking to your loved ones, I wouldn't necessarily lead with giving them a bunch of facts unless you know that they're really specifically interested, because they might have some self-interest here too. But you want to stay in those higher frames about what our system is doing to us. And then I'll show you some subsequent statements that we want to try and center our speaking around. But let's get into the good stuff right now. So I did divide it into two categories here, so you can see the different mechanism that we're using that gets you these great things. And this is the great progress here. We're lowering prices, or we're setting the price. So that's that first step. We're setting the price. In that, prescription drug negotiations are happening in Medicare. 48 million people in Part D. The government is going to be able to negotiate directly with the drug prices for what they pay. This is historic. This is a breakthrough. The prescription drug lobby has long been fighting this for decades, okay? They're the biggest lobby. They're the most sophisticated. They're the most loving, most moneyed, okay? They have the most money, #1 lobbyists in Washington, right? And guess what? They're also the best looking, believe it or not. They hire supermodels and very good looking people to go up on the Capitol Hill. Go to YouTube, there's lots of videos about this. Very tricky, very slick, and they're very powerful. So we have taken power away from them, and we hit them where it hurts right now, okay? This is the power that they covet the most, the unilateral control of pricing their product. They had no restraints. They could raise prices beyond inflation. They could raise prices 10, 20, 50%. The sky's the limit. So we hit them where it hurts, and this is a win. It's breakthrough. It's historic. So the second thing under lowering prices, there you go, is the inflationary caps. So when the drug companies raise prices beyond the rate of inflation, they are required to send a rebate back to Medicare to make up for the cost of what they're doing. Again, it's very common knowledge. It's very common for them to try and raise the price beyond inflation. No, there were no rails. So the second part, the lowering out-of-pocket cost. So this is where basically the government is picking up the tab for anything over, but I just want to point out the lowering prices part at the top of the slide. That is saving billions. So the money that we're saving up there can go to help subsidize what's happening down, the lowering the out-of-pocket costs, etc. So seniors on Medicare Part D are going to have a limit of only $2,000, I shouldn't say only, but $2,000 per year. So it's not uncommon for seniors to go above $2,000. Many seniors take many medications to live a quality, happy life. I know seniors that have had organ transplants. You take a lot of prescription drugs when you have an organ transplant. You take a lot of prescription drugs when you've had a heart attack in your past. So it's not uncommon for seniors. It was not uncommon for seniors to spend more than $2,000. So they're going to be limited now to $2,000 on Part D. So that is historic, that is a breakthrough. So then the next thing is a very, very popular thing. The first ever cap on paying for insulin, $35 per month. this is great. This is wonderful. And you can see how many people, we were spending $1 billion out of pocket on insulin, seniors. So this is great. And just to mention, this was proposed to extend to the rest of us that have private insurance. And when I say private insurance, I'm talking about people that get their insurance through their employer, which I know we have quite a few people, but this was rejected by the Republicans, and it could not be passed through the reconciliation process because the reconciliation process gets applied only to public programs, and that was for private, and we needed to have the Republicans with us on that particular thing, and they weren't with us. So if you are watching and you have private insurance and you would have liked this insulin cap, you know who rejected it for you. It was not our side. The next thing is that they're going to limit annual premium increases from 2024 to 2030. Great. Oh, another great thing, make vaccines free for everyone on Medicare. So one of the more common thing that seniors vaccines that seniors get is the shingles vaccine. Previously, they had to pay for that. Shingles is a very painful condition. I can certainly see seniors that decided that they were going to try and save a little money because they didn't know where to make ends meet. Again, people living in pain because of our system, an example there. So now vaccines are free for seniors. Wonderful breakthrough. And then I know I referred to the $2,000 out of pocket cap for seniors on Part D. I know many of you are very caring people, and you know that that's a lot of money for low income folks. So I just wanted to say that there is a program that was expanded to help people that are extremely low income. They're going to be more eligible for a subsidy program. So they won't even have to hit that $2,000 cap. So that's very good news. So if you want to ask me questions at the end, more specifically about some of these provisions, I'll be happy to answer them as best that I can. Or if I don't have the answer, I can find out for you. I'd be happy to do that. So let me just find my mouse here. Bear with me, everyone. Where'd my mouse go? Okay. So I love this quote by Dr. Martin Luther King. Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane because it results in the physical death. Okay, I just wanted to remind us of this quote. And this goes back to what I was talking about before, about sharpening our language and really talking about what is happening to us, what is happening to our neighbors, what is happening to our families in real sharper terms. Okay. And I seem to have lost my mouse, so I have to do this manually here. Okay, so here are some examples about how to think about the Inflation Reduction Act. Okay, you heard me say some of these things when I was talking about those provisions. This is a healthcare cost breakthrough. This is negotiations are a major breakthrough. Medicare negotiations are a stepping stone to bigger advances. The insulin cap, it's a historic breakthrough. Wonderful. All right, and here's some more examples. The inflation cost control is innovative. It's a step in the right direction. It is a step. We're going towards setting the price, taking the power back to the people. Okay, and the prescription drug cap cost is groundbreaking. So there you go. And I will hand it back to Robert. He's going to talk to you about climate. And again, we'll be happy to answer questions at the end. I look forward to hearing from you. Oh, I did just want to say one more thing. Sorry, I forgot this. So I just wanted to remind everyone what happened after the ACA was passed. Just because something, as we know, just because legislation has been passed, sometimes they still come for us at the end. So I want to encourage everyone, make sure you go to your town halls for Tammy Baldwin, make sure you go to your town halls for your representatives, and reinforce that this is a good thing. We need to defend this, because even after something is passed, as you have seen, they try to cut out progress. They try to take away progress away from you. So if you see a town hall, make sure that you get a couple of your friends, make sure that you're there, because the other side might be turning up to try and take some of these things away from us. All right, Robert, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. And I just would say on healthcare, look, the major elements of the medical industrial complex, their goal is maximum revenue, maximum profit, period. And the only thing that will prevent that and prevent healthcare inflation from continuing to skyrocket out of control, we'll have a poll coming out soon that we're working on with a national partner will show how bad it is in Wisconsin, how it's affecting working families and middle-class families. We already know it's bad, but this should be an eye-opening in its results. But the climate situation has similarities in the sense that there are large economic actors that are for short-term profits and for creating fortunes, risking the stability, future stability of civilization. In the worst case scenarios for runaway climate change, risking billions of lives. And I know that's a big number, but it's that bad. And we know from the consensus of climate scientists that we need to get dramatic reductions by 2030. And there are international agreements on that, and the standards come from the International Panel on Climate Change, which is the overwhelming consensus of climatologists internationally, that we need to at least not to have runaway climate change, catastrophic climate change that could get so out of control that leads to billions of deaths, flooding of a huge percentage of the major cities in the world. I could go on and on. I want to mention the wildfires, the floods, and everything else, that we have to cut emissions by 45% of the 2005 levels, so a lot lower than 45% of current levels. And we had not done anything as a federal government. The federal government is the one entity with the financial resources to operate the scale of the problem. Look, state and local government play a role, but they cannot do this on their own. They don't have the money. And the federal government has known, and we have known with scientific certainty since the 1980s that this was happening. Would have been not been very difficult at all to address this problem easily if we'd started in the 1980s or the 1990s or the first decade of the 21st century. The later, the harder. But we are now 8 years away, and we were at a deadline because really that Republicans are still favored to take back the House, and we need to prevent that, but they may still because of gerrymandering. And that means there could be no further action for the next 2 years if the presidency would switch hands to Republicans, and the Republicans are the only conservative party in the advanced world that is climate denying. Other countries, France, Germany, England, do not have climate denying conservative parties. Then we couldn't have started in that scenario until 2029 at the earliest, a year before the deadline, which makes it impossible. So this was in many ways the last best chance to have any chance to head off runaway climate change. And it looked like it was dead. And what we got, despite some painful compromises, which I will go into in order to appease and get the final vote of Senator Manchin, what we got is historic reforms, the first major to scale investment to prevent a climate disaster, a catastrophic climate change. And it gets us 80% of the way, according to a consensus of climate scientists. That is a 40% reduction in greenhouse emissions by 2030, and that's a net reduction. That includes the damage done in the fossil fuel provisions insisted upon by Senator Manchin in return for his vote. So this is historic. It's potentially a lifesaver. And I should say, as far as equity, because we get parochial in this country and don't think globally, the people who will suffer the most, where there'll be the biggest death toll and the most dislocation, is going to be the Southern Hemisphere, which is predominantly Black and brown folks. It's the part of the world that is the least developed and therefore has produced very little of the greenhouse gases that are warming our planet. So if you're talking about a genocide, you're talking about a racist genocide, which you can see Karen put on your screen. That's, I need to mention that simply to make that make sense. So thank you, Karen. And so I'm going to talk some about the provisions, and I will get to what had to be given away to do this. And this is what we mean by radical pragmatism. You often, when you don't have all the power, and we'll never have absolutely all the power, you often have to give some things away to get things, but what you're seeking is a deal that is mostly beneficial and that you can build on. And this definitely meets that standard. It actually puts us in range where we could feasibly, with really strong state and local action, and Citizen Action is working on climate action plans around the state, the local level, that can make a big difference in accelerating this. We might even be able to make 45% without further federal action. Our preference is to have a lot more federal action and to build not only the full Build Back Better agenda, the much larger package that originally passed the House and could have passed the Senate if we had 2 more Democratic votes, and we can if we pick up 2 Senate seats net, including the one in Wisconsin, which we all need to be working hard on. But in addition, we actually support the Thrive Act, which is the $10 trillion plan, but we need to build towards that. Okay, that's the gold standard. That's the Medicare for all of climate change. Now, the other thing about this is it gives us another opportunity. We have had a terrible era the last 50 years since the 1970s of inequality, of deindustrialization, of a flight, the deliberate rigging of the economy and the flight of good jobs. And the result has been devastation in a lot of cities in the upper Midwest, Milwaukee being one of them, that used to be far more prosperous. The African-American middle class was, and in fact, the African-American population here was the wealthiest in the country in the late 70s because of the plentiful union manufacturing jobs. And the deliberate conspiracy to outsource those and to deunionize has devastated not only Milwaukee, but areas like Wausau and north central Wisconsin. It's damaged northeastern Wisconsin. It's damaged La Crosse, which used to be a big industrial center, for example. And we really should be at the front of the line to, if we're going to reopen the economy to prevent a climate catastrophe, we can also open it up to change it and make it equitable. And we already have a fast growing green sector. This green sector is, the jobs are predominantly held by white people, white males who are older. And we need to intervene, and we can do that with these investments in order to make sure the people who need the jobs the most have access to them, and we can return to the prosperity of the post-war era, the time between the late 1940s and the mid to late 1970s. Now, this is historic that way too, and we can do it better because in places like Milwaukee, Citizen Action is leading, making this also a plan to revitalize the economic equity of the city and create the most family supporting jobs we can to scale for, and especially for the people who are left out of the current economy. All of this money could fund those plans, and we have no way to fund them with city resources or state resources without this. This provides it, and it provides a lot of the tax incentives. Now, you may be asking on the net advantage of this. A lot of climate scientists have crunched the numbers already. In the worst case scenario, that is that the Manchin provisions on oil and gas leasing maximize the possible additional fossil fuel consumption and burning, right, and its carbon impact. In that worst case scenario, the benefits of this proposal, this law now, outweigh the cost by 24 to 1 in terms of net climate positive impact. And in the better case scenarios, they outweigh them 80 to 1. So I'm going to get to why they're bad and how we need to correct them. But this was a deal we had to take given the deadline. And that's what we mean radical pragmatism. And you take a deal anytime, then the worst is 24 to 1 in your favor when you're facing a crisis. and could be 80 to 1. Now, I do want to point out, though, that we have a moral obligation to build the power, that is, elect the Senate and have the grassroots movement backing them up to correct the major problems we are facing. And because that Senator Manchin inserted into the bill, it does damage frontline communities that are in the Gulf Coast and in the West, that are going to be proximate to the additional gas and oil drilling. And they've already suffered from gas and oil drilling, and that is not okay. And so, but we need 2 more senators to repeal those provisions. And we in Wisconsin have a special obligation, given that we're a battleground states, have one of the 2 big Senate races that could give us a 2-vote majority. There are others that we might be leading into, but Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are where the rubber meets the road, okay? We also can put pressure on the Biden administration to slow walk implementation of the Manchin provisions in the law. That's something, but we need to organize to do that and have active, organized people in motion. The other thing is, it has been widely reported and the provisions have been leaked. There's a much more damaging side deal negotiated by Senator Manchin and Majority Leader Schumer in order to get Manchin's vote, in other words. But the side deal is not part of this law. It has to be passed as separate legislation. It could be blocked by progressives in the Senate and progressives in the House. We need to mobilize and make sure that happens, because then those percentages are not as good. The side deal is much more damaging than anything Manchin got within the actual provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I've skipped over a lot of numbers, but the document that Kate put in the chat has more specific numbers on how many jobs. I gave you the climate reduction numbers, but there are other numbers there. And I can also tell you, just as how good this is, it really improves equity because it focuses, rather like the cancellation of student debt that the Biden administration did yesterday. It focuses on people who are left out, on low-income people, on people of color. Right now, you see a lot of solar panels going up around in middle-class areas of this state, where I live in the Bayview neighborhood of Milwaukee. You don't see them on the north side of Milwaukee, where African Americans live, much poorer, or on the near south side of Milwaukee, where most Latinx folks live, or the biggest concentration of Milwaukee. And that's because the tax credits aren't valuable enough that are available right now for them. They can't go and get a green mortgage to fund it, right? The utilities are standing in the way because the utilities could help finance that and do in other states, but refuse to here because they'd rather have short-term profits than prevent a climate cataclysm in coming decades, which is already, you've seen the signs of it already this summer, and we're seeing them more, going to see them more and more. But what this bill does is it has so many tax credits and provisions that fully pay the cost of full electrification for low-income households, for appliances energy efficient, for heat pumps that allow you to fully electrify your house and make solar really work for that house, for energy efficiency, conservation, insulation, everything to make your house more energy efficient. That experts I've talked to who do this kind of work, local businesses that are allied with us, union businesses, tell me there would be no cost to them, that this pays the whole freight of doing that in the poorest neighborhoods. And we don't have that. And right now, we will have it because of the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, how well we use it, how much the city of Milwaukee, state of Wisconsin lean in and put even more around it and help implement it better, that will also make a difference and could make the money go even further. So that's an example of how this spreads advantages that middle-class people are already taking advantage of. But right now we know, Sierra Club does great research on this, the highest energy burden, that is the burden, that is the cost of utilities relative to income, is in African-American neighborhoods in Wisconsin. Second highest is in Latinx neighborhoods. So they have the most energy inefficient housing, it's older, and they have relatively lower wages. So that big utility bill is more unaffordable for them. And utility cutoffs, those are a major thing that face folks on the north and south side of the Milwaukee all the time and stalk them because they can't afford just their basic heating bills. And if they're lucky enough to have air conditioning, their cooling bills, this fixes a lot of that. It makes it much better. So I want to conclude, therefore, that we have more work to do. This can be built on, just like the negotiating of prescription drug prices and Medicare can be built on over time to full Medicare for all and negotiating for all prices, right, with the health insurance industry. This shifts power from the fossil fuel industry and the for-profit utilities that dominate energy policy. And it's a step towards what we need to do, not only to prevent a climate genocide, but also to create a just and fair economy that lifts all boats. So that is what we think of climate. You have the document, the climate provisions. We think they are historic and we can build on them, but we need people to be involved in organizing in order to really take advantage. Now, finally, these are the more simple provisions, but also powerful, the provisions that actually made it in on tax fairness. And it was difficult because Senator Sinema, especially, but also to some extent Senator Manchin, made it very hard to do what most Democrats in Congress want to do and the president want to do. The one thing that did not make it is a billionaire's tax, a minimum tax on the ultra-rich that President Biden supported, first Democratic president to support anything that bold, but Senator Sinema would not allow it, so it's not in the bill. Now, let me start with the situation. The ultra-rich have rigged the tax system against us, and they've done it at a time when they've rigged the economy against us, so they've gotten most of the economic gains. In 1970, the ultra-wealthy paid 50% of their incomes in taxes. Today, they pay 23%. Corporate profits in 1960 were taxed at 52%. Today, they're taxed at 21%, and many still pay zero, big corporations, because there are so many loopholes. In addition, the ultra-rich have grabbed the lion's share of economic growth. If you look at compare the ultra-rich, the top 1%, to the bottom 50%, okay? The ultra-rich had 10% of the nation's income in 1980. They've doubled it. They have 20% today. The bottom 50% had 20% of the nation's income in 1980. It's plummeted to 12%. So they are making much more than everyone else, getting the gains of economic growth, and they've rigged the tax system so they don't pay their fair share of taxes and starve the public services that we need to build a fair and just society with the supports we need. I mean, this money pays over and over again for free universal childcare, Medicare for all, for the climate transition we're talking about, for paid family leave, for income supports like a guaranteed income, which we need to get to. They could all be paid for if corporations, the ultra-rich, simply paid the proportion of their ill-gotten gains that they paid in 1980 and paid after in the period from World War II to the late 1970s. So here is what we did get. Part of the rigging has been that they've defunded the IRS. Republicans have consistently refused to fund the IRS. The IRS does not have the money, has fewer employees than it had 20, 30 years ago. It's not able to crack down on the epidemic of tax cheating going on from the ultra-rich and major corporations who have armies of accountants and lawyers to figure out new loopholes and to push the envelope every tax cycle. And so you can tell you're getting somewhere when you see how big the lies are by the pre-fascist party, the Republican Party, which has moved to an anti-majoritarian position that's a threat to democracy. They say that this bill, the increased spending in this bill, is going to deploy 87,000 more IRS agents. They're going to be armed, which is a lie. And in fact, the 87,000 number is not a real number. It is made up based on a formula. And that they're going to sick them on average people. It is not going to be that at all. And the Trump-appointed IRS secretary says it will not be. That will focus where the money is. That is the tax cheats among big corporations and the ultra-wealthy. So that's all a lie. This will collect the additional funding for the IRS in this bill. It will act, and actually other new employees are going to replace retiring employees. It's not going to be that big an increase in employees, and they're not going to be armed. It's going to raise $124 billion. That's how much money is being just stolen. by the ultra rich because we have a rule of law only for average people whose most of their tax they're taking out of their paycheck. The people who really get away with murder are the ones who most of their income is not their paycheck, but is all sorts of complicated things like dividends and other financial instruments that they can hide more easily because it's not just taken out regularly the way our withholding is for our paychecks for all middle class and working class people. There is here's the big breakthrough. There's a corporate minimum tax. We've heard for a long, long time that a lot of our biggest corporations pay zero taxes, even though they have record profits. It's because there's so many loopholes, they're figuring out how to either not realize profits or to realize them somewhere else, like in Ireland, even though they're Irish companies, right? And other places, the Cayman Islands. There are a number of tax shelters, countries. Ireland's not the worst, but I'm calling out Apple Computer. I believe it's Apple on the Ireland claim. And so this says it's a 15% minimum tax. And I didn't put it in the document that was shared, but I should have. I can do it in a revision. And that is, this is on profit they book. Like when you hear just how profitable they are, which they want to show in order to increase stock prices and please Wall Street, right? This is before they take any of their deductions or find any of their loopholes. There is a loophole that'll work, though, in order to reduce their the amount of profit they actually book in their books, in their financial statements, and that is they could invest more in capital investments here in the United States, therefore create more jobs because that would reduce their profit if they took it from profit. They could also raise wages for their workers, and guess what? That would reduce their tax liability and get it back to zero. What they can't do is simply find a way to hide it all together and keep it without taxation, which is what they're doing now. So this is something we can build on to a billionaire's tax and even more, because this is just the beginning. There's been great economic work done recently by economists at University of California, Berkeley, and other places, which shows how we can actually create a fair tax system. And there are a lot of provisions we could build in and reforms beyond this. But this is the best start, the best advance we've seen in terms of tax fairness in many, many decades, at least since the 1960s and 1970s. So that's an advance. The IRS funding is an advance. This does hold middle and working class people harmless. It does not raise taxes on people who make less than $400,000, which obviously we think anyone who makes more than that is not middle class, even if they think they are. And furthermore, it is just not so that this is that the Republicans in the floor debate, in the House, in every cable TV show have to lie about this and just tell complete fabrications, tells you they got nothing else to defend the tax code. They know how widely popular this is. The only way they can succeed is straight propaganda and misinformation. So we see this as a step forward, but we think there's still a long way to go to get to full tax fairness in this country. But this is a start, and it's the most we can get right now. It's the radical end of the possible. What we have to do, though, with all these provisions, healthcare, climate, and taxes, we got to build the people power, the outside power to push for more. In other words, just saying we want more in social media doesn't do anything. We have to come together. We have to have more people organized in motion. And we also have to bring those people together to win elections. We play a huge role in Wisconsin. In New York, California, they can't increase the number of US senators. In Wisconsin, we can get one of the two seats needed to go much further and build on the Inflation Reduction Act. And we only have a few weeks to do it. So Citizen Action has plenty of volunteer opportunities. I want to encourage that. That is taking agency and ownership of getting what we need and building to a just society.
Yes, and so I think that's my cue. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kate Felton. I am Citizen Action's organizing director, and I wanted to pop in after this great talk and give you a chance to sign up and get involved. So, like we've said, this is an incredible and historic piece of legislation, but it cannot be the end. And we do not see it as the end. And I think our very first opportunity to really get involved and influence further policy is by electing Mandela Barnes to the U.S. Senate and other amazing progressive candidates up and down the ticket. And so I'm going to be, we actually have canvases going on in every single region throughout the state, in Eau Claire, Wausau, Green Bay, potentially Appleton, different parts of Milwaukee. And so there's canvases near you. I'm going to put in a link to for you to sign up to canvass. We do also have a weekly phone bank that's going to be active at least once a week on Wednesday evenings, and will become more frequent as we get closer to the elections. So you'll have an opportunity to sign up for phone banking as well if you are not located in a region where there's an active canvass happening. So I'm going to put that in the chat. So that's your sort of most immediate opportunity to influence further policy and further things like the Inflation Reduction Act. Additional to that, like Robert and Karen have alluded, these are issues that we're talking today. These are issues that Citizen Action is working on throughout the year, even outside of election season. And so we have campaigns from the local to the state to the federal level that are happening and being led by our members, by our members who are taking the lead in their own communities. And that is all made possible by our organizing cooperative model. And so I'm going to also include a link to explore the possibility of joining your local co-op. There are co-ops in the Northwestern region, North Central, Northeast, Southeast, and the Driftless region. And we also have a healthcare specific co-op and a co-op on the north side of Milwaukee. So would really encourage you to become active with your co-ops as well as a dues paying member. So I'm going to include that in the chat. And I also did want to say that all the links that I'm going to share and the links that we're forwarding to the one-pagers about the tax, climate, and healthcare issues. Those are all going to be emailed to you in an email after this event. And so don't worry about scurrying to save them. You will receive them in an email. I'll pass it back to Karen.
Okay, we are entering the Q&A section of the of our program, and I see we have a few questions that were in the Q&A, and it looks like Robert actually answered them. So what about people in Wisconsin, senior care prescription drug program? So Robert, you answered that in writing. Can you answer it verbally? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm just typing another one, so repeat.
Oh.
Which one do you want me to answer?
Oh, what about from Joni Anderson? Hi, Joni. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
what about
senior care is uniquely applies to Wisconsin, a special waiver gotten for during the because it already existed. So a waiver that was made part of Medicare Part D. Senator Cole was the former Senator Cole was the major leader on it. So that has not changed, but Wisconsin's the only one who gets the senior care deal, and it would be better if the whole country could, but that's a unique advantage Wisconsin, only Wisconsin has, grandfathered in, as they call it.
Okay, great. And then Nancy, hi Nancy, thanks for joining us. We're so happy you're here. Will the slides be available? I'm so glad you enjoyed the slides because I made the slide deck. Yes, I can certainly make sure that you have access to the slide deck, and I'm happy that you enjoyed them. Camp C. So thank you for being here and thank you for the question. So you ask if this addresses the gutting of the Medicare system and the Medicare Disadvantage program. I like your play on words there. So they're talking about the privatization of Medicare. And Robert, do you want to answer that? I see you answered it in writing.
Yeah, and I just say, I think there are two elements of that. One is there's this pilot program started under Donald Trump to move people without them knowing it towards Medicare Advantage through a pilot, even if they thought they were in Medicare, like my mom, who would never go to Medicare Advantage and would be appalled if she was moved. And there's been a lot of progressive pressure on Secretary Becerra Department of Health and Human Services and the White House on that. There needs to be more. And if we have members who want to engage, that is part of getting to Medicare for all is saving Medicare in the first place. I also think Medicare Advantage, Medicare Disadvantage is a better term for it, is a conspiracy against Medicare because there was just endless, ceaseless promotion of those plans by private insurance companies because of the W. Bush administration got their foot in the door. It costs more. In other words, they sold it as saving money, but they get more money than traditional Medicare. And they try to cherry pick Medicare with all sorts of misleading ads from trusted former actors, who have some kind of celebrity name, and they pay off a lot of providers. My mother, who is vehemently pro Medicare for all, is constantly telling me of various health clinics and others trying to get her to sign up for Medicare Advantage. It's clear they're getting a kickback. So they're trying to undermine Medicare that way and get everyone out of it. And I think that all need to be stopped too. And I'll just say one thing: the Inspector General, the independent investigators, has twice done major reports saying that there is a massive amount of claim denial in Medicare Advantage. 90% or higher than 90% of any kind of complaints are appeals are actually confirmed, so they get their money, but only 5% of seniors ever appeal. So it appears to be, and the Inspector General says this, a deliberate business practice knowing that most seniors will not be up to actually filing an appeal. And that is why you can't have private insurance companies in between seniors and their Medicare.
Okay, great. And yeah, thank you for coining that Medicare disadvantage. We have some of the smartest, funniest members. So I think that's going to make it into our lexicon. So Valerie asked if the new provisions apply to Medicare.
They only apply to Medicare because of the filibuster. We need 2 more Senate votes to repeal the filibuster. They would have been broader, but Republicans objected, and of course, none of them would vote for it, so it couldn't get the 60 votes required by the Jim Crow era filibuster.
Excellent. Okay, and then one more question. So Mandy, she's asking, can you touch on the Climate and Equity Plan and how the Inflation Reduction Act will impact it? Hi, Mandy. Thank you for joining us.
And if you mean there are 2 possibilities here. There's the one in Milwaukee, the city county task force developing. There's also the bill by Representative Supreme Moore Makunde and Senator Larson, the climate and jobs package. It would help both of those. It actually provides them a funding mechanism, and they can go further because they can go even further than could be in this deal. But this is a funding mechanism for it. State and local government don't have the resources. We've always thought in Milwaukee that we were building a climate and economic equity plan for Milwaukee because the money would eventually come because of the climate crisis. Cities and regions that had plans on the table and were ready to use it fast would get the most impact. And Milwaukee, I can tell you, Milwaukee should be front of the line for a new economy because it was a very prosperous area and ahead of most of the country until the current era, until the service sector deindustrialization outsourcing era brought on by the biggest economic actors, the ultra rich and largest corporations and their political allies over the last 40 years. So yes, it would help both of those and give us a leg up in other places that don't have these advanced plans.
Oh, and I just noticed I have 2 people that raised their hand, and I can unmute them. So we do have a little bit of time. We'll try and take those questions. So Jim, I'm going to try and unmute you. We'll see how this works, and you can ask your question verbally. Okay, I just tried it. You should be getting a message. Is it working?
Oh, how do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jim.
My biggest concern is the climate. If what Robert, you said comes to pass, everything else is irrelevant. I believe that we only have 3 years to act, and I don't think this IRA is going to do enough quickly enough. I'm curious, do you know what a climate emergency declaration by the president, what powers would that give him? Would it give him the power second part of the question, would it give him the power to nationalize the fossil fuel industry? Treat it as an eminent domain sort of thing and a threat to our existence, because it is going to get really bad really fast, and I just don't think this does it. It just doesn't.
It does, according to climate scientists, get us 80% of the way there, but we have to do more. We're much better off than not passing this. It's unclear, actually, Jim, and if you get information said to me, how much a climate emergency declaration by the president would advance it. In fact, he didn't do it before because he knew there might be a deal and this would turn Manchin off. So the timing doesn't mean he can't, right? He did. We now know why he didn't, because he knew something we didn't know. That is that a deal was still in the offing because everyone thought it was dead. It's unclear, and here's why it's unclear, Jim. They've rigged the judiciary, the Supreme Court. We know that. We see the consequences. We don't know what they would rule. In other words, and we also don't know what they'll rule on student loan forgiveness, even though legal experts believe that that's within the power of the federal government and the executive branch. All we need is the Supreme Court to declare otherwise, like taking away a constitutional right. And so we're not sure, but I think that, here's what I think is going to happen. I think if we hold the House and pick up votes in the Senate, that President Biden has been very clear he wants to go further, and then we could do more legislatively. His first choice is legislative. It's not vulnerable to all these challenges. It can't be reversed by the next president, because we could have a president in 2 years. But if we lose either House, I think he understands, he's the first president to fully grasp the climate emergency. He understands we need executive action. Now, he's in the more moderate wing of the party, even though he's moved substantially left. We will need organized people to push him to be very, very bold in that scenario. That is, we can't pass laws anymore because we've lost either the House or Senate, Jim. And I think we need organized people here pushing to make him as bold as possible. You're right. We need the emergency is not over because we passed this law, but it's sort of like, I don't know, a football game and we were 4 touchdowns down and we actually scored 2 touchdowns at the end of the half and now within range. So we still got work to do, but it's no longer as hopeless as it was a month ago.
Okay, excellent. And we have one more question from Colin. Colin raised their hand, so I'm going to hit allow to talk, and you should get a message on your screen, Colin. Hi,
hello.
Colin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Colin.
Colin McKenna from Racine. My question to you, Robert Craig, you said you guys need 2 more senators, Senator Manchin and I think Sinema, right, on climate change?
Yeah, we got a 50 vote majority, and those 2 conservative Democrat senators can decide what we can do. If we had 2 more, that would be winning this race, replacing Ron Johnson with Mandela Barnes, winning Pennsylvania. That would be replacing the previous incumbent who's retired with John Fetterman. And then we have a chance to pick up Ohio with Tim Ryan and the North Carolina race. And we need to hold the other races in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia with Senator Warnock. Right now, we have a decent chance of doing that. We also need to hold the House that's gerrymandered. Wisconsin has a key House race there, the 3rd House district, congressional district in Western Wisconsin. Ron Kine retired. But we are very close to having a true governing majority. We haven't really had that the last 2 years because of those 2 conservative, frankly, corporate bought senators, Manchin of West Virginia, Collin and Sinema of Arizona.
And I had a question for you on Manchin and Sinema. I was thinking, why doesn't Citizen Action do some postcards so people can get and send to Sinema and Manchin? Have Citizen Action do a message on the postcards and we could hand them out to people and friends that we know?
Well, if we have to deal with them again next cycle, we can consider those ideas. The legislature is not going to be taking a lot more action. The Senate this cycle, they go and try to reelect themselves. But I will say this, Citizen Action, we were part of creating a federation of groups like us called People's Action. And we do have like groups like us, affiliates of People's Action in Arizona and West Virginia. West Virginia Citizen Action and Lucha in Arizona. And so we take cues from them on what would be helpful. And this is something we could do more of. What they wanted in Arizona. In West Virginia, apparently it doesn't help. Anything out of state just encourages Manchin to dig in. So it really has to be all West Virginians. In Arizona, what we were doing is we were running phone banks from the other People's Action affiliates, including Citizen Action of Wisconsin, where we were calling Arizonans and getting them to call Sinema on these issues. So we absolutely, if we're in the situation again, will consider wanting to do that again. Now we'll need volunteers from all of you, but we're going to figure out with that. We know that Lucha in Arizona and West Virginia Citizen Action are the best place to tell us what would move their U.S. senators. But I agree with the spirit of what you said, Colin. We need to do what we can. Hopefully we'll not have to rely on senators in those two states anymore. And the biggest thing we can do is to volunteer in Citizen Action's grassroots canvas to elect Mandela Barnes, and we can do half of it in Pennsylvania, and our allies in Pennsylvania, including our People's Action affiliate in Pennsylvania, Stand Up PA, will do their job. Then we don't have to worry about Manchin and Sinema nearly as much.
All right, I think that's it. Very good. Okay, thank you. Thank you for attending, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. This is great. It gives me great hope that so many people signed up to watch this. It shows that the grassroots army is out there. Now it needs to deploy. So let's get it done.